Alright, I'm going to kind of piggyback on Karsten's video. Strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. Because I believe this is a topic that, everyone in the MMA YouTube community, whether they agree with one side or the other, has, a reasonable amount to say. And, instead of kind of doing them piecemeal, I kind of was thinking, Karsten's going to do the video. I was pondering doing the video for some time, and why not hit it up now? So hopefully Carson accepts the response, so we can keep them kind of linked. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. The question is, are Pride Fighters overrated? I'm going to throw a new wrinkle into the video, or into the reasoning, and I'm going to kind of maybe expand on a few ideas he has. But watch his video. It provides a very solid explanation of Pride Fighters' struggles and Pride Fighters' non-struggles in the UFC since the Pride UFC Wars. Now, the wrinkle I'm going to throw in there that perhaps that was not touched on is the cage. It may not be overly apparent to a lot of people, but fighting in the cage is a different fight than what is in a ring. A fighter that suits the ring doesn't necessarily suit the cage, and it's quite obvious. Like you watch Pride, and you see a lot of wrestlers coming in. You see a lot of wrestlers getting beaten. You see a lot of takedown defense being displayed that you don't see in the UFC. That's because of the cage versus the ring. Now in the UFC, wrestlers have always somewhat dominated since before Zuffa. Just think about the Hall of Fame for a moment. You have Randy Couture, you have Dan Severn, you have Matt Hughes, you have Ken Shamrock, you have Hoist Gracie. These are all ground fighters. The only one in there that isn't is Chuck. And Chuck is a wrestler first and foremost. It just happens he uses it in a different way. And that is, the cage gives you so many options for takedowns. It gives you the ability to do the Rashad Evans style, what he did Rampage, where you push him up against the cage and you hold him there. You could not do that in Pride. You would get yellow carded. You would get, you would get called for stalling. You also really couldn't pin the guy against the ropes. So I think people really, really overlook that as a significant difference. Another thing is about the cage is that it's a mental thing. When you're in a ring, there's that feeling of competition. This is legitimacy. This is all that. Whereas in the UFC, you're in a cage. There's always that bad connotation to cage fighter. It's like almost being a caged animal. Now, for the record, I'm not speaking out you should fight in a ring versus a cage. I'm just trying to come off with the mindset that could possibly affect people. You're a little bit of a caged animal. You can't, it feels a little bit more underground, and some people I don't think respond to that very well. We've seen that with the media, doesn't respond to that well. I mean, there's not the same level of outbreak against boxing, despite its worst safety record and its admittedly problem-causing effects of a boxing career, but you don't get it. I think part of that is that MMA does look a little more brutal, and another part of it is that the ring versus the cage, the ring is just that, more accepted thing. So, there's a mentality aspect to it that, I really can't even explain very well. You would really need to get someone who's fought in the ring and the cage at a high level and try to get them to explain it. That would be my best bet. Just kind of reiterate some of the things to also go a step further, look at the Pride fighters who have done well in the UFC, or at least haven't disappointed. They tend to be guys who their style works with the cage. Dan Henderson, Rampage. Not that Rampage so much uses it, but Rampage has that threat of a takedown because he is a wrestler. He has that ability that if things are not going well, he can push you up against the cage and take you down. And you know that when you step in the ring with him. Dan Henderson, same kind of thing. You don't have that with, Nogueira particularly. You don't have that. Well, you do have that with a Gomi, but it's just not what he does. Um, so that's the thing you're looking at, and the other thing, of course, is battle age. Carson talked on that. You look at the guys who came in and haven't done per se as well as perhaps expected. Nogueira with the whoopings he took at the hands of Frank Mir and most recently Cain Velasquez. Nogueira is a battle-aged individual. He's a man beyond his years because of his career, his chosen profession. Another good example is people will say Dan Henderson didn't have a very good time in the UFC, but I really beg to differ. Losing to Rampage and losing to Anderson Silva, two guys who they are pride guys. Like for all the comments regarding how the UFC has proven to be the superior thing, one of the big pride guys has actually only been beaten by former pride guys. So I don't particularly understand that. Of course, recently losing to Jake Shields was very sad, but still. So that's the thing. And, the thing that does really mind-boggle me is that it's not like the Pride guys came in and got beaten soundly by their counterparts. They're UFC equivalents in the Pride UFC wars. Dan Henderson came in and fought his UFC equivalent, Rich Franklin, and whether you agree he won the fight or not, he put up a fight to the point where it would appear that they are equal-ish. Chuck Liddell beat Vanderlei Silva, his Pride counterpart, really. But you know what? A lot of Pride guys were saying it all along that it's a stylistic matchup that did favor Chuck. He also promptly got knocked out heavily by his other Pride counterpart, Shogun Rua. Takanori Gomi comes in and gets beat by Kenny Florian. Kenny Florian is not his UFC counterpart. People would say, well, BJ Penn would beat him, and he is his UFC counterpart. That's true. He would also beat a lot of his UFC counterparts. Jens Pulver, Dean Thomas, Cal Uno, I would probably take him against Matt Serra. It's kind of like they're getting beaten by the guys who have stepped it up since the Pride UFC wars. So I think the idea that Pride fighters being overrated, and Karsten was, fairly similar to that. It's a lot of people that haven't seen the fights, are going by Fight Finder, or they saw the fights and they didn't really objectively look at how good a guy could be and the skill of the guy he's fighting. Which is part of it, because if you have no respect for a guy's opponent, what he does is much lesser to you. It's like watching. We saw on Tough recently, Jamie Yeager beat up Charles Blanchard. We didn't really have a lot of respect for Charles Blanchard, particularly. Now, some people still hyped Yeager, but people who looked at it objectively still wanted to see him fight someone good before really getting anywhere near behind him. And that same could be somewhat said by the Pride guys. But if you go in there recognizing the achievements of both guys in the ring, i.e. a Fedor-Cro Cop fight, you recognize that Cro Cop was a very, very hard man to take down, was a devastating striker by MMA standards. You watch Fedor fight him, because this is the most apparent fight, and you don't think of that as Cro Cop, who got knocked out by Gonzaga, and he wasn't good. You realize that something has changed, and Cro Cop is the most apparent with this. That I really think the cage unnerves him. You take that, you go in there realizing that Cro Cop was a good fighter. Was he number 2 in the world like Pride fans said he was? It's debatable, but I think the main debate is whether it was him or Nog. Is kind of the issue. You watch that fight, you gain an appreciation. And there are other fights. There's the Shogun versus Arona. It's a pretty good one. Shogun versus Overeem. Both fights, people are hyping Overeem, the anti-Pride guys, and Overeem's a Pride fighter who didn't do very well at 205 or at heavyweight, really, in Pride. So you can't always blame their weight cut. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Anyone who wants to make a response to this is really quite free. I will, as long as it's not just name-calling childishness, I'll accept it, even if I don't agree or not. I mean, this is an exchange of opinions. Anyways, that's all I have to say.